Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing our series on Emerson's journals. We are on journal collection number 28, and we are up to May 23rd of that year. And with that said, I'll go ahead and get started. May 23rd. You may regret calamities if you can thereby help the sufferer, but if you cannot, mind your own business. Then instantly you are comforted, then instantly the evil begins to be repaired. May 25th. My dear sir, clear your mind of cant, said Dr. Johnson. Wordsworth, whom I read last night, is garrulous and weak often, but quite free from cant. I think I could easily make a small selection from his volumes, which should contain all their poetry. It would take Fidelity, Tintern Abbey, Cumberland Beggar, Ode to Duty, September, The Force of Prayer, Lycoris, Lines on the Death of Fox, Dion, Happy Warrior, Laodamia, the Ode. Composition. Let not a man decline being an artist under any greenhorn notion of intermeddling with sacred thought. It is surely foolish to adhere rigidly to the order of time in putting down one's thoughts, and to neglect the order of thought. I put like things together. Let a man be a guest in his own house. Let him be a spectator of his own life. Let him heal himself, not by drugs, but by sleep. Let him not only do, but be. Let him not vaticanate, but hear. Let him bask in beauty, but not always carry on a farm. A young man told Edmund Hosmer that he had come for the honeysuckles, because his father liked them, but for his own part he would rather see a hill of potatoes. Hillman could not see in the yellow warbler on the fir tree any more beauty than in a rat. May 26th. The individual. Who shall define to me an individual? I behold with awe and delight many illustrations of the one universal mind. I see my being embedded in it. As a plant in the earth, so I grow in God. I am only a form of him. He is the soul of me. I can even with a mountainous aspiring say, I am God, by transferring my body, my fortunes, my private will, and meekly retiring upon the holy austerities of the just and the loving, upon the secret fountains of nature. That thin and difficult ether I also call breathe. The mortal lungs and nostrils burst and shrivel, but the soul itself needeth no organs. It is all element and all organ. Yet why not always so? How came the individual, thus armed and impassioned to parricide, thus murderously inclined, ever to traverse and kill the divine life? Ah, wicked Manichae! Into that dim problem I cannot enter. A believer in unity, a seer of unity, I yet behold too. Whilst I feel myself in sympathy with nature, and rejoice with greatly beating heart in the course of justice and benevolence overpowering me, I yet find little access to this me of me. I fear what shall befall. I am not enough a party to the great order to be tranquil. I hope and I fear. I do not see. At one time I am a doer. A divine life, I created scenes and persons around and for me, and unfold my thought by a perpetual successive projection. At least I say so, I so feel, but presently I return to the habitual attitude of suffering. I behold, I bask in beauty, I await, I wonder. Where is my Godhead now? This is the male and female principle in nature. One man, male and female, created he him. Hard as it is to describe God, it is harder to describe the individual. A certain wondering light comes to me, which I instantly perceive to be the cause of causes. It transcends all proving, it is itself the ground of being, and I see that it is not one, and I another, but this is the life of my life. That is one fact, then, that in certain moments I have known that I existed directly from God, and am, as it were, his organ, and in my ultimate consciousness am he. Then, secondly, the contradictory fact is familiar, that I am a surprised spectator and learner of all my life. This is the habitual posture of the mind, beholding. But whenever the day dawns, the great day of truth on the soul, it comes with awful invitation to me to accept it, to blend with its aurora. Cannot I conceive the universe without a contradiction? Why rake up old manuscripts to find therein a man's soul? You do not look for conversation in a corpse. To behold the great and the small, the law in one fact, the vegetation of all the forests on the globe, and the sprouting of one acorn, this is the vision of genius. I hail with glad augury from afar that kindred emotion which the grand work of genius awakens, kindred with that awakened by works of nature, the identity of their origin at the fountainhead. I augur with a thrill of joy. Nature is too thin a screen. The glory of one breaks through everywhere. May 30th. Yesterday I attended in Boston Hedges Club. 11 persons were present: Mrs. Francis, Stetson, Ripley, Hedge, Brownson, Alcott, Bartle, Putnam, Dwight, Osgood, Emerson. We met at Mr. Ripley's house. The other day, talking with Hedge of the deference paid to talent, I said there was a pathetic sentiment in receiving such, for it showed how little wit was in the world when an individual pittance is so much accounted. Hedge applied Wordsworth's line, quote, "Alas, the gratitude of man hath oftener left me mourning." It occurred to me again that another instance of this sentiment was a fact that chanced lately and gave me pain, when the good Nancy apologized for going out the front door to church. May 31st. We have had 2 peerless summer days after all our cold winds and rains. I have weeded corn and strawberries, intent on being fat, and have forborne study. The Maryland yellowthroat pipes to me all day long, seeming to say, "Ecstasy, ecstasy," and the bobolink flies and sings. I read, during the heat of the day, Beppo and Manfred. What famine of meaning! Manfred is ridiculous for its purposeless raving. Not all the genuine love of nature, nor all the skill of utterance can save it. It is all one circular proposition. June 29th. Almost 1 month lost to study by bodily weakness and disease. Lately I have been reading with much exhilaration Boswell's Life of Johnson, and was glad I had remembered such a book was. Then by easy steps I came to his journeys to the Western Islands, then to the Life of Pope, of Cowley. Strong, good sense is Johnson, but he is no philosopher, as likewise he says philosophical when he means scientific. Quote, "Judgment is forced upon us by experience," end quote. Quote, "Of genius, that power which constitutes a poet, that quality without judgment, is cold, and knowledge is inert, that energy which collects, combines, amplifies, and animates, the superiority must," end quote, etc. Quote, "The true genius is a mind of large general powers, accidentally determined to some particular direction," end quote. Life of Cowley. Such are the doctor's poor definitions. His best is that of wit in Cowley's Life, Volume 1, page 20, yet he is a mutton-head at a definition. Before Coleridge he would be dumb. Much of his fame is doubtless owing to the fact that he concentrates the traits of the English character. He is a glorified John Bull, so downright, so honest, so strong-minded, and so headstrong. Here follow a few lines from John Donne, which state, quote, "If men be worlds, there is in every one something to answer in some proportion all the world's riches, and in good men this virtue our forms form, and our soul's soul is," end quote. July 17th. Did I read somewhere lately that the sum of virtue was to know and dare? The analogy is always perfect between virtue and genius. One is ethical, the other intellectual creation. To create is the proof of a divine presence. Whoever creates is God, and whatever talents are, if the man create not, the pure efflux of deity is not his. Here are things just hinted which not one reader in 100 would take, but which lie so near to the favorite walks of my imagination, and to the facts of my experience, that I read them with a surprise and delight, as if I were finding very good things in a forgotten manuscript of my own. Creation is always the style and act of these minds. You shall not predict what the poet shall say, and whilst ephemeral poetry hath its form, its contents, and almost its phrase out of the books, and is only a skilful paraphrase or permutation of good authors, and these the good human soul speaks because it has something new to say. It is only another face of the same fact to denominate them sincere. The way to avoid mannerism, the way to write what shall not go out of fashion, is to write sincerely, to transcribe your doubt or regret or whatever state of mind, without the airs of a fine gentleman or great philosopher, without timidity or display, just as they lie in your consciousness, casting on God the responsibility of the facts. This is to dare. Cowley and Donne are philosophers. To their insight there is no trifle, but philosophy or insight is so much the habit of their minds that they can hardly see, as a poet should, the most beautiful forms and colors of things, as a chemist may be less alive to the picturesque. At the same time, their poems, like life, afford the chance of richest instruction amid frivolous and familiar objects. The loose and the grand, religion and mirth, stand in surprising neighborhood, and like the words of great men, without cant. Two proverbs I found lately. One, quote, "He who would bring home the wealth of the Indies must carry out the wealth of the Indies," end quote. The other may serve as foil to this magnificent sentence, quote, "Small pot, soon hot," end quote. Then again I found in the Phoenix the Persian sentence, quote, "Remember always that the gods are good," end quote, which for genius equals any other golden saying. At Plymouth, which is one of the most picturesque towns, with its 200 ponds, its hills, and the great sea line always visible from their tops, I enjoyed the repose that seems native to the place. On the shore of Halfway Pond, our party ate their gypsy dinner. The next day we rolled on the beach in the sun, and dipped our spread fingers in the warm sand, and peeped after bugs, and botanized, and rode and walked, and so yielded ourselves to the Italian genius of the time, the dolce far niente. It is even so that the population of the historical town is on its back presently after dinner. Lydian says that they who have only seen her baby well does not know but half of his perfections. They do not know how patient he is, and suffers just like a little angel. They must see him sick. If he should flap his little wings and fly straight up to heaven, he would not find there anything purer than himself. He coos like a pigeon house. July 19th. If you go into the garden and hoe corn, or kill bugs on the vines, or pick peas, when you come into the house you shall still for some time see simulacra of weeds and vines or pea pods, as you see the image of the sun some time after looking at the sun. Both are disagreeable phenomena, as bad as laughing. The office of reading is wholly subordinate. By knowing the systems of philosophy that have flourished under the names of Heraclitus, Zoroaster, Plato, Kant, by knowing the life and conversation of Jesus, of Napoleon, of Shakespeare, and of Dante, by knowing chemistry and commerce, I get hereby a vocabulary for my ideas. I get no ideas. I wrote this afternoon to Miss Fuller that power and aim seldom meet in one soul. The wit of our time is sick for an object. Genius is homesick. I cannot but think that our age is somewhat distinguished hereby, for you cannot talk with any intelligent company without finding expressions of regret and impatience that attack the whole structure of our worship, education, and social manners. We all undoubtedly expect that time will bring amelioration, but whilst the grass grows, the noble steed starves. We die of the numb palsy. But ethics stand when wit fails. Fall back on the simplest sentiment. Be heroic, deal justly, walk humbly, and you do something and do invest the capital of your being in a bank that cannot break, and that will surely yield ample rents. July 21st. Courage consists in the conviction that they with whom you contend are no more than you. If we believed in the existence of strict individuals, natures, that is, not radically identical but unknown, immeasurable, we should never dare to fight. Crabbe knew men, but to read one of his poems seems to me all one with taking a dose of medicine. July 26th. Yesterday I went to the Athenaeum and looked through journals and books, for wit, for excitement, to wake in me the muse. In vain and in vain. And am I yet to learn that the God dwells within? That books are but crutches, the resorts of the feeble and lame, which, if used by the strong, weaken the muscular power and become necessary aids? I return home. Nature still solicits me. Overhead the sanctities of the stars shine for evermore, and to me also pouring satire on the pompous business of the day, which they close, and making the generations of men show slight and evanescent. A man is but a bug, the earth but a boat, a cockle drifting under their old light. July 27th. A letter from Carlyle today rejoiced me. Pleasant would life be with such companions, but if you cannot have them on good mutual terms, you cannot have them. If not the deity but our wilfulness hews and shapes the new relations, their sweetness escapes as strawberries lose their flavor by cultivation. Then there's an untranslated Latin phrase. Quote, poets are the natural guardians of admiration in the hearts of the people, end quote. Many trees bear only in alternate years. Why should you write a book every year? July 29th. If the All-Wise would give me light, I should write for the Cambridge men a theory of the scholar's office. It is not all books which it behooves him to know, least of all to be book-worshipper, but he must be able to read in all books that which alone gives value to books, in all to read one, the incorruptible text of truth, that alone of their style is intelligible, acceptable to him. Books are for the scholar's idle times. Pope and Johnson and Addison write as if they had never seen the face of the country, but had only read of trees and rivers and books. The striped fly that eats our squash and melon vines, the rosebug, the cornworm, the red old leaf of the vines that entices the eye to new search for the lurking strawberry, the thicket and little bowers of the pea-vine, the sign of ripeness and all the hints of the garden, these grave city writers never knew. The towers of white blossoms which the chestnut tree uplifts in the landscape in July, the angle of strength, almost a right angle, at which the oak puts out its iron arms, the botany of the meadows and water-sides. What had Queen Anne's wits to do with these creatures? Did they ever prick their fingers with the thorn of a gooseberry? Did they ever hear the squeak of a bat or see his flitting? August 1st. I should think water is the best of inventions if I were not acquainted also with air and fire. August 2nd. The farmer's rule for making hay is to keep the rake as nigh the scythe as you can, and the cart as nigh the rake. A beauty overpowering all analysis or comparison and putting us quite beside ourselves we can seldom see after 30. Gertrude had a cheek like a sunset. The two most noble things in the world are learning and virtue. The latter is health, the former is power. The latter is being, the former is action. But let them go erect evermore and strike sail to none. An enchanting night of south wind and clouds, mercury at 73 degrees. All the trees are wind harps, blessed be light and darkness, ebb and flow, cold and heat, these restless pulsations of nature which by and by will throb no more. Poetry, I augur, shall revive, and stamp a new age as the astronomers assure us that the star in the constellation Harp shall be in its turn the pole star for 1,000 years. I knew a man scared by the rustle of his own hatband. When the narrow-minded and unworthy shall knock at my gate, I will say, Come, now will I sacrifice to the gods below. Then will I entertain my guests heartily and handsomely. Besides, is it for these to choose what shadows shall pass over thy magical mirror? August 3rd. Hannah Haskins tells well the story of Aunt Mary's watcher, whilst she had felon on her thumb. She had never a watcher in her life, and was resolved to have one once, so seized the chance. All day was making preparations for her coming, and requiring the family to have these things in readiness. Twice or thrice she sent messages over to the woman's house to tell her to sleep and to fix the hour of her coming. When at last she came, she put the watcher to bed that she might be ready, and watched her herself, but presently woke her because she thought her head did not lie comfortably. Then again because she snored, to forbid her making such a shocking noise. At last she became anxious lest her watcher should spend the night and day break before she had got any service from her. So she determined to get up and have her own bed made for the sake of giving her something to do. But at last, growing very impatient of her attendance, she dismissed her before light, declaring she never would have a watcher again. She had passed the worst night she remembered. On the other part, Miss Blank, the watcher, declared that no consideration would tempt her to watch with Miss Emerson again. Quote, By the shadow of the stone of hours. It is ignorance only which complains of a trite subject. Every subject is new to the wise, and trite to the incapable. Eloquence washes the ears into which it flows. The grass is mown, the corn is ripe, autumnal stars arise. After raffling all day in Plutarch's Morals, or shall I say angling there, for such fish as I might find, I sallied out this fine afternoon through the woods to Walden Water. The woods were too full of mosquitoes to offer any hospitality to the Muse, and when I came to the blackberry vines, the plucking the crude berries at the risk of splintering my hand, and with the mosquito mounting guard every particular berry, seemed a little too emblematical of general life, whose shining and glossy fruits are very hard beset with thorns, and very sour and good for nothing when gathered. But the pond was all blue and beautiful in the bosom of the woods, and under the amber sky, like a sapphire lying in the moss. I sat down a long time on the shore to see the show. The variety and density of the foliage at the eastern end of the pond is worth seeing. Then the extreme softness and holiday beauty of the summer clouds floating feathery overhead, enjoying, as I fancied, their height and privilege of motion, and yet not seeming so much the drapery of this place and hour, as for looking to some pavilions and gardens of festivity beyond. I rejected this fancy with a becoming spirit, and insisted that clouds, woods, and water were all there for me. The waterflies were full of happiness. The frogs that shoot from the land as fast as you walk along, a yard ahead of you, are a meritorious beastie, for their cowardice is only greater than their curiosity and desire of acquaintance with you. 3 strokes from the shore, the little swimmer turns short round, spreads his webbed paddles, and hangs at the surface, looks you in the face, and so continues as long as you do not assault him. Language. As Boscovich taught that 2 particles of matter never touch, so it seems true that nothing can be described as it is. The most accurate picture is only symbols and suggestions of the thing, but from the nature of language all remote. August 5th. A man should behave himself as a guest of nature, but not as a drone. God never cants. And the charm of Plutarch and Plato and Thucydides for me, I believe, is that there I get ethics without cant. I am struck with the splendor of the sentences I meet in books, especially in Plutarch, taken from Pindar, Plato, and Heraclitus. These 3, it was Menander who said, quote, "Whom the gods love die young." August 8th. I have read Miss Martineau's first volume with great pleasure. I growled at first at the difference betwixt it and the Plutarch I had just left. The sailors refuse lemonade and cake and sugar plums, and ask for pork and biscuit. Quote, something to line their ribs with, and pleasant and exhilarating as the book is, I lack the solids. It pleases like a novel, the brilliant pictures of scenery and of towns and things which the sketches, but I feel, as I read, I enrich myself not at all. Yet, better pleased as I read on, I honored the courage and rectitude of the woman. How faithful is she found, where to be faithful is praise enough. She gives that pleasure which I have felt before, when a good cause which has been trampled on is freshly and cheerily maintained by some undaunted man of good sense and good principle, and we are all contrite that we had not done it as if we could have done it. This attribute of genius she has, that she talks so copiously and elegantly upon subjects so familiar that they seem desperate, and writes evermore from one point of view. The woman is manifest, as she seems quite willing, in the superfluous tenderness for the fine boy, and the snug farmhouse, and other privacies. But the respect for principles is the genius of the book, and teaches a noble lesson, through every page. I will thank those who teach me not to be easily depressed. An excellent specimen of poetry of its kind is the epitaph on the criminal who was killed by a fall from his horse. Quote, between the stirrup and the ground, I mercy asked for mercy found. Vide Boswell's Johnson. Which word can you spare? What can you add? A proud man should not wear shoes, nor eat sugar in his tea, nor walk in the road, nor ride, no, nor eat, nor drink, nor wear anything. If he is so good that he cannot associate with men, let him not creep about, their debtor for everything. We are so helplessly mendicant in our relations to each other that pride is dishonest. Robinson Crusoe may be as proud as he pleases. The aim of churches and colleges and parties is to drill. The aim of reason and of God is to create. I read with pleasure in Miss Martineau's book the lines of Brutus and Shakespeare, quote, countrymen, my heart doth joy that yet in all my life I found no man but he was true to me. Shakespeare knew better than to put the coxcomb speech that has been reported of old in Brutus's mouth at his death, quote, that he had worshipped virtue all his life and found it but a shadow. I read with pleasure, and for quite a different reason, the vivacious expression that the Western immigrants were, quote, the perspiration of the Eastern states. August 9th. Clarendon alone among the English authors, though I think I see the love of Clarendon in Burke, has successfully transplanted the Italian superlative style. And there's a untranslated quotation from Horace. This rule of rhetoric is a rule of conversation also. Always suppose God, and do not cant upon interpositions here and there, as if anywhere he were absent, or you were anything. What is man but God impure? The world seems very simple and easily dispatched to the theorist. There are but two things, or but one thing in its shadow, cause and effect is itself worthless, if separated from cause. It is cause still that must be worshipped in effect, so that it is only one thing. The worship of effect is idolatry. The Church, including under the name doctrine, forms, discipline, members, is the instant effect. Weak man adheres to the effect and lets God go. The Iliad, the Porch, the Academy is the effect, admirable, adorable in the moment of their appearance and their spontaneous working on the mind. But when, as speedily happens, severed from the cause and regarded as having a perfection per se, they spawn with rules, prescriptions, observances, they become noxious idols. The indisposition of men to go back to the source and mix with deity is the reason of degradation and decay. Education is expended in the measurement and imitation of effects, in the study of Shakespeare, for example, as itself a perfect being, instead of using Shakespeare merely as an effect, of which the cause is with every scholar. Thus the college becomes idolatrous, a temple full of idols. Shakespeare will never be made by the study of Shakespeare. I know not how directions for greatness can be given, yet greatness may be inspired. Always cast back the child, the man, on himself. Teach him to treat things and books and sovereign genius as himself, also a sovereign, that he is porous to principles by nature, a perfect conductor of that electricity, and when he is in the circuit, divine, when not, dead. My garden is a mat of vines, herbs, corn, and shrubs. One must pick strawberries and peas before he can know that there are as many to glean as to gather. I like the fragrance that floats by from I know not what weeds or plants, as I stand in the pea vines and pluck the little pendulums. Every time I pull, one of his neighbors make a gentle rattle in their pod to invite the hand to them. I sit and have nothing to say. In the great calm my ship can do nothing. I have confidence that if the winds arise and the waves toss, I have rigging and rudder and hands to sail my ship. But when the sea is full, there is no whirlpool. When the river is flooded, no falls, and the stoical plenum, no motion. I had a letter from Dr. Frothingham today. The sight of that man's handwriting is Parnassian. Nothing vulgar is connected with his name, but on the contrary every remembrance of wit and learning and contempt of cant. In our Olympic games we love his fame, but that fame was bought by many years' steady rejection of all that is popular with our saints, and as persevering study of books which none else reads, and which he can convert to no temporary purpose. There is a scholar doing a scholar's office. Carlyle. How the sight of his handwriting warms my heart at the little post window. How noble it seems to me that his words should run out of Nithsdale or London over land and sea to Weimar, to Rome, to America, to Watertown, to Concord, to Louisville, that they should cheer and delight and invigorate me. A man seeking no reward, warping his genius, filing his mind to no dull public, but content with the splendors of nature and art as he beholds them, and resolute to announce them if his voice is orotund and shrill in his own proper accents, please or displease the world. How noble that he should trust his eye and ear above all London, and know that in all England is no man that can see so far behind or forward. How good and just that amid the hootings of malignant men he should hear this and that whispered qualification of praise of Schiller, Burns, Diderot, etc., the commended papers being more every year, and the commendation louder. How noble that, alone and unpraised, he should still write for he knew not whom, and find at last his readers in the valley of the Mississippi, and they should brood on the pictures he had painted, and untwist the many-colored meanings which he had spun and woven into so rich a web of sentences, and domesticate in so many and remote heads the humor, the learning, and the philosophy which, year by year, in summer and in frost, this lonely man had lived in the moors of Scotland. This man upholds and propels civilization. For every wooden post he knocks away, he replaces one of stone. He cleanses and exalts men and leaves the world better. He knows and loves the heavenly stars, and sees fields below with trees and animals. He sees towered cities, royal houses, and poor men's chambers, and reports the good he sees, God through him telling his generation also that he had beholden his work, and sees that it is good. He discharges his duty as one of the world's scholars. The farmer turns his capital once a year, the merchant many times oftener. The scholar cannot. The knowledge which he acquires will not become bread or reputation to him in a year or 2 years or 10. There is no double speeder, no railroad, no mechanical multiplication. He gives himself to the slow and unhonored task of observation. For all this loss and scorn, he is to find consolation in exercising the highest functions of human nature, The wisdom that he painfully gathers sweetens his own life. He is made gentle, noble, and self-centered, and who is so becomes, and in the heart of all clear-seeing men, venerable and salutary and oracular. He preserves for another generation the knowledge of what is noble and good. The Southerner asks concerning any man, "How does he fight?" The Northerner asks, "What can he do?" August 12th. It is a sublime thing to oversee oneself as we do in memory. The general has only to stimulate the mind of his troop to that degree that they ascend to the perception that they are men, and the enemy is no more, and they are bold, and the victory is already won. How foolish is war! Let the injured party speak to the injurer until their minds meet, and the artillery is discharged in forced marches of the army that were clambering in 6 weeks over mountains and rivers are too slow and cumbrous. The blow is already struck, the victory gained, the peace sworn. I fear the Cochrane rifle or the Perkins steam battery will never do. These are wrath and wrong embodied, but unhappily for their potentates, they are finite, and the force opposed to them is infinite. And if they could contrive an engine to rain cannon-balls all day over an acre, as we water a garden bed, it would prove nothing but ingenious and speedy transportation of iron, a pretty toy, but for tyranny or anger quite useless. All the life I have lived lies at my dictionary, from which to extract the word which I want to dress the new perception of this moment. This is the way to learn grammar. God never meant that we should learn language by colleges or books. That only can we say which we have lived. Life lies behind us as the quarry from whence we get tiles and copestones for the masonry of today. August 14th. The preacher enumerates his classes of men, and I do not find my place therein. I suspect, then, that no man does. Everything is my cousin, and when he speaks things, I immediately feel he is touching some of my relations, and I am uneasy, but whilst he deals in words, I can slumber and sleep. The flowering weed and sere stubble gay facts or grave facts alike confirm his, the wise man's thought, not less than if there were a voice, quote, "as thou hast said," quote. If Jesus came down into the world, he would say, you, he said to his age, I. He that perceives that the moral sentiment is the highest in God's order rights himself. He stands in the erect position, and therefore is strong, uses his hands, works miracles, just as a man who stands on his feet is stronger than a man who stands on his head. There never was a saint, but was pleased to be accused of pride, and this because pride is a form of self-trust. I like not to have the day hurry away under me whilst I sit at my desk. I wish not reveries. I like to taste my time and spread myself through all the hour. Do they think the composition too highly wrought? A poem should be a blade of Damascus steel, made up of a mass of knife blades, and nails and parts, every one of which has had its whole surface hammered and wrought before it was welded into the sword, to be wrought over anew. The least effect of the oration is on the orator, yet it is something. A faint recoil, a kicking of the gun. August 17th. This morning Mr. Alcott and Mr. Hedge left me. 4 or 5 days full of discourse, and much was seen. I inclined to withdraw continually as from a surfeit, but the stomach of my wise guests being stronger, I strain my courtesy to sit by, though drowsy. In able conversation we have glimpses of the universe, perceptions of the soul's omnipotence, but not much to record. I, who enjoin on Alcott records, can attain to none myself, to no register of these far-darting lights and shadows, or any sketch of the mountain landscape which has opened itself to the eye. It would be a valuable piece of literature could a report of these extended and desultory but occasionally profound, often ornamented, often sprightly and comic dialogues be made, sinking some parts, fulfilling others, and chiefly putting together things that belong together. I would rather have a perfect recollection of all this, of all that I have thought and felt in the last week, than any book that can now be published. Society. These caducous relations are in the soul as leaves, flowers, and fruits are in the arboreous nature, and wherever it is put, and how often soever they are lopped off, yet still it renews them ever. Infancy, Coleridge says, is body and spirit in unity. The body is all animated. If this state should be perpetuated, we should have men like the gods and heroes carved on the friezes of the Parthenon. Now the adult figure is ugly, and we are thankful it is clothed to save our eyes from offense. But Phidias's men are as lovely and majestic in their nakedness as is the child. The Aliede is to be explained on the principle of community or oneness of nature. It is the body's perception of difference based on radical oneness. Strange that anybody who ever met another person's eyes should doubt that all men have one soul. This is the end of Part 3 of Emerson's Journal Collection number 28, dating from the year 1837. In the next video, we will continue with the year 1837 and catch up with Emerson in August 18th of that year. Thank you for listening.